Your breaking news just moments ago, we confirmed that some charges have been dropped against former President Donald Trump here in Georgia.
Atlanta News First anchor and attorney Joy Lim-Nakrin is here in studio. So, Joy, how many of these charges were dropped?
So just 2 criminal charges concerning former President Donald Trump, an additional concerning one of his co-defendants. And again, majority of the counts do stand and his 14 co-defendants. In fact, 8 charges against Mr. Trump are going forward. This decision coming down from Fulton County Superior Court Judge Scott McAfee, who said that essentially he found state prosecutors did not have the authority to bring the charges that have now been dropped, which are related to the alleged filing of false documents in federal court. So essentially, he cited a lack of jurisdiction for the charges which he ruled should be dropped because he ruled that they should fall under federal jurisdiction. Of course, he's a Fulton County Superior Court judge. Nevertheless, 8 of the charges against the former president will be moving forward here in Fulton County as of right now, but 2 of the charges against former President Trump have just been dropped.
Breaking details. We know you're going to continue to stay on top of this news.